Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hormone Helper podcast. I'm Coach Andrew, your hormone helper from Fit for All Fitness. I personally coach over 1,600 men and women to help better understand their hormones so they can lose weight and get their metabolism back on track. With this podcast, you're going to hear from me and my special guests about everything from metabolism to thyroid to weight loss. And we even talk a little bit of sexy time as we chat to spread more knowledge thick like butter on your hormones. If you're ready to learn, I'm ready to share, so let's do this. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. In this episode, we are going to be talking solely about hormonal imbalance. So what is the hormone imbalance that people see traditionally on the regular, how hormone imbalance happens, what I tend to see as a coach, and also what you can do about this hormonal imbalance, which is huge. So this podcast episode actually kind of came to life from a conversation that I was having with a few parents after a seminar that I did at a school. So I was teaching kids on nutrition and how they can get better sleep and better focus and better attention span. And then all these parents come up to me and they're like, Andrew, I don't know if it's a hormone thing for me. My hormones might be messed up. I don't know where to start. And it's funny because a lot of adults, although they're, in this adult world where they have access to a lot of information, they don't know where to start when it comes to their hormones. And they don't even know if something is even hormonally wrong with them. So in terms of some steps, the only way that you can really check out your hormones is either through blood work or through a saliva test or a urine test. These are the kind of three staples that I like to look at. Most doctors and practitioners, they're going to have you do blood work. And with that, they're going to have a bunch of ranges that's on that blood work. This blood work is essentially designed by the government to see whether or not something needs fixing, not if something needs repairing. So these hormone ranges are really wide. They're 16 years old to 75. And the reason why the majority of you are not told that you have hormonal issues is because if you fall in that wide range between 16 years to 75 years old and your hormones fall somewhere in the middle, you are told that you are normal and that there's nothing wrong with you. However, case in point for me, if I'm a 31-year-old male and I have the hormone panel of a 75-year-old, is that normal? No. And this is why you need to take a look at your hormones and you need to start looking at those values to see if any of them are off. So now in terms of hormone imbalance, what are the types of things that people experience with an imbalanced part of hormones? Well, here they are. If you have a short attention span with really poor memory, you struggle to focus on tasks. If you have poor muscle development and you struggle with activity, meaning every time you exercise, you feel worse instead of feeling better, and it's really hard for you to put on muscle. If you have skin issues and stomach problems, whether it's any type of IBS issues, bloating, any type of digestive distress, like maybe you can't absorb gluten or dairy, or you have skin issues like psoriasis or acne. Final thing, chronic fatigue with weight gain. If you are experiencing those issues, you have a hormone imbalance. You have something inside of you that is off that, of course, can be shifted and can be fixed, but it's something that you need to look at. Now, there's tons of different hormones in the body, but in my experience, people only have inside their bodies 4 different types of hormonal imbalance. They have an estrogen imbalance, in which case it's normally an estrogen dominance. They have a testosterone imbalance, in which case it is a lot less testosterone. They have a cortisol imbalance, or they have a TSH imbalance. And TSH stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. So these 4 tend to be the imbalance because they are the main function system of your metabolism. So I like to refer to your metabolism like your house of hormones. So if you were to think of your body like a furnace that needs to burn calories and energy all the time, how well does the furnace run? Second part of that is your thermostat. which is essentially your thyroid. How fast or how slow can it make this furnace output? And then the rest of it is going to be your electrical panel and your plumbing, which is how quickly can you digest things and flush them away? And does your nervous system, do your lights turn on, and can you remember things? So these four hormones, estrogen, testosterone, cortisol, and your TSH, are responsible largely for your metabolism functions. Now, in this podcast, I'm only going to be talking about two. I'm going to be talking about cortisol imbalance, and I'm going to be talking about estrogen dominance. And the reason why is because in my experience as a coach, you never really have testosterone issues or TSH issues because they are the byproduct of estrogen change and cortisol change. So what I mean by that is your hormone estrogen and testosterone, they like to talk to each other and they like to fight for dominance of each other. So if estrogen is high, then testosterone is low, and if testosterone is high, then estrogen is low. Because of that, we only start to develop issues when estrogen starts to get high. The same thing can be said with cortisol. Cortisol is our stress hormone. So when we experience and when we have a lot of high stressors and cortisol becomes high, our thyroid starts to have a hard time keeping up with our stress and keeping up with that usage. So it starts to fall low and get tired as well. So 99.9% of the time, you never have a testosterone issue or a thyroid issue. You have an estrogen issue and a cortisol issue. So I want to talk about both of those and essentially what you can do to kind of make some of those changes and how we can alter them. So let's start cortisol first. So number one, cortisol actually does have a lot of benefits in your body for being a stress hormone. Essentially, cortisol acts like the fuel in your gas tank, and it is responsible for how much energy you have through the day and how much inflammation you can tolerate. So, besides being your daily energy resource, it directly deals with any type of inflammation that you have. So, meaning if you do physical activity, it's responsible for dealing the inflammation with that. If you're going through mental stressors or emotional stressors, it deals with the inflammation of that. Inflammation of your stomach, even in your joints, anything that puts a stressor on the body, it has to fight. Another great part of cortisol is it's responsible for your fight or flight mechanism, meaning it helps combat active stressors to make them in a more manageable and easy to process way. And when it does that, it also helps improve memory and retention. This is why whenever we are in a fight or flight response, we're super sharp, our muscles are completely active because it's setting everything together. And another hidden benefit of cortisol is it promotes the breakdown of body fat. So there's a lot of great benefits to cortisol. However, you need to have a stable and consistent cortisol level in order for you to experience these benefits. So, the way that a real cortisol cycle is supposed to work is essentially you're supposed to go to bed at a reasonable time, let's say like 9, which 90% of you don't do. So, 9 o'clock. From 9 p.m. onwards to when you wake up, about that 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., your cortisol will slowly build, which is basically your body filling up the gas tank for the next day. When your gas tank hits its full, then you naturally wake up and your body is fully recharged for the energy to be used through the day. Now, that being said, just because we filled up our tank and it's ready to go, doesn't mean that that tank is just going to last slowly on what we've built through the evening. We need to make sure that we're eating throughout the day to fuel up that gas tank. Otherwise, that gas tank's going to hit empty pretty quick. So this is why during the day, we have our breakfast, which tops up the tank. We have our lunch, which tops up the tank. We have dinner. We have a few snacks in between. By doing that, we're essentially preventing the tank from going to reserve. When it goes to reserve, this is where you can throw your cortisol out of imbalance. So every single time we dip into our reserve fuel, we signal our body that our body needs to stop production of all other hormone and make solely cortisol. This is how we get a high amount of cortisol stressing through our system. Now, regardless of whether that happens from a physical reason, a mental reason, or an emotional reason, same thing. Your cortisol, your stress hormone's going to wind up, you're going to wind up, and then next time the body's going to say, I need to store more energy for later. Now, what does that result in if you don't evenly spread out that energy and you don't fill up your own gas tank? Well, it results in weight gain because all fat is usable energy. It results in inflammation because if there's never any cortisol to use during the day, you can't get rid of your inflammation. And it results in you being in this space where you're always having high levels of anxiety, high levels of stress, and you have poor coping mechanisms. So, this is why cortisol can be really dangerous. Ultimately, if you allow it to progress and get super, super out of control or out of imbalance, your thyroid will no longer be able to help support your stress hormones, and your thyroid will fail as well too. So, this is how you start getting a slow metabolism. When your thyroid gets tired, you run slow, you run cold, you gain weight, and that's why you feel like crap. So there's kind of 4 stages to this feeling of cortisol imbalance to where people get. The first is basically like a regular cortisol cycle. So essentially, first thing, 6 a.m., your cortisol should be at its highest. It's great. And then gradually over the span of the day, you're slowly lowering your cortisol until you get to the evening and you go to sleep. That is a normal and natural cortisol cycle. Now, if you're the type of person that's always shorting your energy, you're missing your meals, you're not fueling your body, and you don't have good stress coping mechanisms, then you get to this next phase, which is what I call the tired but wired. So, this is where now in the morning, your body doesn't have enough cortisol to kickstart your tank, to start up your car. So, you're dragging your butt around in the morning. You're dragging all the way till 9:30. You maybe have just a little bit of energy to power you through the day. Then you have a 2 to 3 p.m. crash, which like is impossible for you to get through. And then in the evening, the body does what it's always done. It starts to fill up your gas tank again, but you get the gas tank filled at around 6, 7, 8 p.m. So instead of you feeling tired when you're supposed to, you actually feel wired. So you're tired during the day and you are truly exhausted, but you're wired at night and you have this inability to fall asleep and really to kind of go to bed and recover. That's because if your body doesn't fill up the gas tank when it should have, it's going to find any chance it can to fill up that gas tank with cortisol. So at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you don't get to that tired but wired state. The next level, however, it goes a step deeper, and it's something that I call the anxious tosser. So if you get to this point where you're always getting tired but wired in the evening, and it's hard for you to focus and it's hard for you to pay attention during the day, your body's going to say, I'm just going to turn cortisol production temporarily on and leave it on. Kind of like setting your thermostat to hot unintentionally if you can't get the temperature up. Now, temporarily, it's good. You have high cortisol in the morning, your energy's throughout, and you might just have a little bit of restless night syndrome. However, when you go to leave that on, your body always pumping cortisol into its system is going to signal your thyroid to stop functioning, and it's going to signal estrogen that it needs to start increasing as well. So when you get to this anxious tosser mode, you always find yourself in a period where everything is just super overwhelming because you are in an active stress response. You're like, I just can't. It's too much. Oh no. I'm just so overwhelmed. That's what happens when you experience this anxious tossing of the hormones being permanently high. Eventually, the final stage of this is you become exhausted. Your body makes very little cortisol, and you are tired and fatigued, and you've gained a ton of weight, and it's stuck like that the entire time. So cortisol doing its job is fine. Cortisol out of sync this way obviously it's very, very dangerous. And the trouble with cortisol is cortisol talks to the hormone estrogen. So what happens from an estrogen perspective is it's going to say to the body, I need more energy. I don't have enough energy to be able to increase in the way that you're asking. So you need to put more fat on your body so I can have more energy to use. Now, enter in, of course, the high levels of estrogen. So, estrogen. Estrogen has a lot of benefits. Okay. Number one, estrogen is responsible for fat storage and fat usage. So it is your energy maintenance hormone. It's why women and females tend to have more estrogen in their body, because they sometimes need to carry a child and they need to have enough energy for two. So everyone has estrogen, both males and females. It's responsible for, of course, repairing your tissues and your ligaments. It is responsible for energy storage and energy usage, and it acts as a transport. So estrogen and fat cells, being energy, they transport throughout your body wherever energy is needed. So that's kind of the main benefit of what estrogen does. Now, the dangerous part about estrogen is estrogen unchecked self-multiplies. Because if you think about it like this, a fat cell is a car, and the estrogen lives or takes a drive wherever it needs to go inside the fat cell. If the body's asking for more energy to store, you have more estrogen. If you have more estrogen, you need more vehicles. If you have more vehicles, you have more passengers, and that cycle keeps expanding all the time, just like it is on our crazy busy roads now. So when estrogen self multiplies, you've got a problem. And that problem becomes a weight problem. But then it goes somewhere else. It goes into your stomach. See, estrogen normally floats around your organs. It floats around either ovaries for females, or it floats around your testicles for males, because those are essentially the gonads at which those hormones cycle around. Now, if you start having this excess estrogen and fat starts building everywhere, the first place that fat builds is around your organs. So guess where estrogen's going to go? Inside your organs. And the most frequent place that estrogen likes to live is your stomach. This is where digestive issues start to come from. So estrogen seeps its way into your stomach. It's really hard for you to digest and process food. Now you start having dairy issues. You start having gluten issues. You start having random food triggers, bloating, inconsistent stools. And all of that comes from estrogen attacking what's inside your stomach. Ultimately, that's going to result in a change in your metabolism. If you cannot process food the same way, and if your body is in fat storing mode, then your thyroid is going to slow down, because it's recognizing, I can't keep up with what I'm doing. That's why I'm asking for all of the energy. So, what causes this estrogen change? We talked about what causes cortisol. It's stress, and it's not fueling your body. From an estrogen perspective, there are two things that cause a shift in estrogen hormones. Number one is overstimulus. So people be drinking caffeine. They got pre-workouts. They're doing 5-hour energy shots. Caffeine and alcohol is a huge overstimulus for estrogen. And that's because you're not giving your body real energy. You're giving it temporary energy. Actually, I'll give you a fun fact on that in a second. You're giving your body kind of a temporary stimulus, and then the body's forced to make up the energy later. An interesting thing about caffeine, for all of you people who drink coffee or even things with caffeine in it, caffeine doesn't actually give you energy. It just stops the signal of you feeling tired. So if you're drinking caffeine, you're not getting any new energy. You're just stopping your body's hormonal signal. It doesn't register it anymore. And now you have to make up for that energy. Caffeine is the number one cause of estrogen issues, because that energy keeps being offset. It's like your body doesn't realize the gas tank is on E, so it uses it, and now your car breaks down. So you want to make sure that if you can, you're either limiting the amount of caffeine that you use per day, which essentially is only 500 milligrams. They've changed the amount. So, if you guys are in good old Canada, a Tim Hortons medium, that's 550 milligrams. So right there, too much. You gotta do less than that. So either lower it or do like I did and eliminate it, because your hormones will thank you. So, second part of overstimulus is an overstimulus of a hormone called dopamine, which we get from social media, from our phone attachments, or from any type of thing that really brings us a lot of joy. People overuse the hormone dopamine to the point where their body doesn't register it anymore, and then that starts to have estrogen issues as well too. So you need to be careful with both of those and limit essentially the amount of overstimulus that you're giving your body, whether it's mental or physical from the caffeine. Besides overstimulus, another thing that changes the hormones is EDCs. And I've talked about them in the podcast just by themselves, the endocrine disrupting chemicals. But you get these chemicals either by eating them or putting them on our skin. So eating them, it's basically pesticides on food, and the fact that most people don't wash their vegetables, which is like, it's crazy. If I could shake my head to that, please wash your food, wash your vegetables, please. But pesticides on food, so that's number one. Second thing is they're buying food that's boxed that has a lot of chemicals in it for preservatives. Okay. The other thing, though, is the chemicals that you put on your skin. So the makeup that you wear, even the medication that you take, your body sees these chemicals and it attacks them. And the byproduct, whatever's left from that attack, is estrogenic in nature. So this is essentially where you start to have a lot of estrogen that floats up in the system. And now you have estrogen that circulates. The hardest part about these EDCs is they can stay in your system for like over 30 years. So you want to make sure that you're limiting the amount of chemicals that you put on, and that's a big aspect of it. So now that we know where the hormone imbalance comes from, which these are the main areas, and yes, of course, there are tons of other places where hormone imbalance can be present. This is what I see with most of our clients who exhibit the symptoms that I said at the beginning. So if you've got like short attention span with poor memory, if you've got that poor muscle development and you're struggling with activity, the skin issues and the stomach problems, and chronic fatigue and weight gain. So if you're experiencing that, these two are going to be your main problem. So what do we do about it? Well, here's what you can do. Okay. First thing that we do in our Vantage program is we go for vitamin C, E, and all the B vitamins. It's huge because C, E, and B3, B6, and B12, they help regulate your stress hormone cortisol. So we put in specific foods into people's diets to make sure that they have those vitamins in their routine. So that way their cortisol is at a manageable level. The next thing that we do is we tell people to start taking magnesium. Magnesium is fantastic, and Clean Basics actually has an awesome ZMA, which is called the zinc magnesium aspartate, as a supplement. Magnesium in the evening helps shut down your nervous system, which helps reduce stress, and it helps you better your sleep. So those two things are great aspects that you can do to reduce the cortisol. And speaking of sleep, I always recommend that you take a look at your sleep routine, because cortisol is directly tied to when it fills up that gas tank. So if you're the type of person who's only going to bed at 11:30 at night and you're waking up at 5 or 6, well, you're not getting enough sleep and you're not fully filling your gas tank with cortisol. You need to slowly dial back your sleep. So I call it cycling back your sleep, and do it in half an hour intervals. So if you're going to bed at 11:30, this week you go to bed at 11, the following week you go to bed at 10:30, and then that way it continues to cycle. So vitamin C, vitamin E, and your B3, your B6, and your B12 vitamins. Take your magnesium at night And if you're looking for a good magnesium, I'll drop it in the show notes, a link where you can pick up Clean Basics magnesium, or take foods with magnesium. You can do that too, right? Almonds, chia seeds, walnuts, avocado. There's great ones. And then cycle back your sleep. We do this with all of our clients who go through a Vantage program because it's so important that your hormones stabilize. And that process normally takes about 3 or 4 weeks through the first part of the program. Now, in terms of the estrogen works in two ways. So, number one, we have to change up, of course, the food. So, this is going to be improving the digestion. I always recommend that people start to take probiotics because the probiotics inside your gut are going to help your gut break down any type of food, and any type of chemical as well. So if you're the type of person that always has gut issues, start looking at probiotics, and there are some great ones. There's off the top of my head, yogurt, sauerkraut, kombucha, tempeh, kimchi, pickles, kefir, and miso. So those are, what was that, 8? Those are 8 great foods that will all help improve the bacteria in your stomach to help improve as a probiotic. You can also take a probiotic separately through digestion. And I will drop one. There's one that we use again from Clean Basics. I'll drop one in the show notes as well too if you guys are looking for that. But of course, food is always going to be your best bet. Now, in terms of removing the estrogen that's floating around, you've got to take chemicals away from your routine. So this is where we tell our clients, hey, look, you got to look at your makeup. You got to look at your deodorant, your body washes. Don't heat up or reheat food in plastics, because all of that stuff puts chemicals into what you eat or onto your body. So big thing with chemicals, aluminum free, BPA and BPD free. If you're looking at those 3 things, then essentially you're going to be able to see changes in your estrogen and in your cortisol. Now, for those of you who are like, hey, I don't know if my hormonal imbalances, whether it's just cortisol alone or estrogen alone, or even if you're in this in between, this is what our Vantage program has been built for. So Vantage program is essentially a 12 to 16 week program, because it depends on what your hormones are like. And essentially, we go through your blood work from your doctor with you. We make sure that it's in your specific range. So we show you where your improvement is. We look at all of the hormones individually, and then we walk through, here's where your imbalance is. Then the first 3 to 4 weeks of that program, we're solely dedicated to balancing those out. And then from there, the weight loss comes easy, your digestion comes back and it's really stable. You're able to eat foods that you haven't eaten in freaking forever and actually go out to restaurants and enjoy. And the most important thing is you have clearer memory and you have your focus back. That is really the hyper focus of our program. The weight piece of it, people are always like, what about the weight? Weight is like the easiest part. Our clients lose anywhere from 2.2 to 3.2 pounds per week. That's what they see through this process. So like I said, it's 12 to 16 weeks, but through this entire journey, you understand how to eat right for your body type. You understand how to keep your hormones balanced. You walk through specifically what hormones you need to be watching, because no 2 people are the same. And then there's also the activity piece, because we take care of that as well too, showing you how to exercise properly and of course how to train right for your body type as well. So now you guys and gals know what hormonal imbalance is. If you experience one of these things, you can always reach out to us. Our contact information is in the show notes, or go to our website, www.fit4allfitness.com. So that's fit4allfitness.com. You can check us out there, and we've got a couple of different programs, but the Vantage program is by far the greatest amount of, I would say, consistency, support that you're getting. Like, of course, all of our programs are great. They just vary in terms of what type of information you're getting. But for hormone balancing issues, the Vantage program is the key one. So thanks for listening to the podcast today, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Bye. Well, it seems I'm all out of info juice for today. That's all for this episode, and thank you so much for listening. Please leave a raving review for me if you've learned something good, and make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Now, if you're in the mood for some more great content and tools to get your hormones on track, why not check out our free Facebook group and the blog on our site? We do amazing weekly trainings in our group that me and my wife call Tea and Teachings that give good tips for anything hormones and metabolism related. It's also a great community where you get to share your goals and success with like-minded people just like you. I'll make sure to drop both the Facebook group link and the blog link in the show notes for you. Or if you're ambitious like me, the name of the group is Weight Loss and Balanced Hormones. It'll say Fit for All beside it with a picture of me. So come and join us and have more fun.